with us on our team, even on these weeks when we're down a little bit. Bridget's away visiting and others. Well, it's nearly impossible to spell out everything that a parent does, but this job description hits the highlights. Summary: long-term team players needed for challenging permanent work in an often chaotic environment. Candidates must be willing to work variable hours, which include evenings and weekends and frequent 24 hours on call. Some overnight travel is required, including trips to primitive camping sites on rainy weekends and endless sports tournaments in faraway cities. Extensive courier duties also required. Responsibilities the rest of your life. Must be willing to be hated, at least temporarily, until someone needs $5. Must be willing to be indispensable 1 minute and an embarrassment the next. Responsibilities also include floor maintenance and janitorial work throughout the facility. Previous experience? None required. On-the-job training offered on a continually exhausting basis. Wages and compensation. Get this, you pay them. Offering frequent bonuses and raises. When you die, you give them everything you have left. The oddest thing about this reverse salary scheme is that you actually enjoy it and only wish you could do more. Benefits: this job supplies limitless opportunities for personal growth and free hugs for life if everything goes right. Well, the free hugs for life, I can tell you as a father of two sons. I did get a hug from my son this morning on Father's Day. Reluctantly, I kind of went in for it. He knew, okay, hug, but that is one of the benefits. Yeah, I wonder how many people, though, would really apply for this job if they knew all that was involved. But then again, I think most of us who are parents would. I loved when the boys were young. It was so amazing and so wonderful. And as they got older and they could do more, I enjoyed them even more. And now, though, Deb and I see people strolling with their infant, and we're both like, I am so glad those days are over. So it was great while it lasted. Now, today's message is on Father's Day, but this isn't just for fathers, just as I've done Mother's Day messages that were for parents. And today's message is also for kids, whether you're 5 or 65, this is for you. We're going to begin by looking at the 5th commandment. This God-given boundary comes with a promise. Here's what God said: honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. What does it mean to honor your father and mother? In the original language, the word honor literally means to make heavy. This means you don't take your parents lightly. God calls us to give them respect and reverence. In biblical times, a parent's word really was law, and they had to be respected. Now, this commandment is tough for us to chew on because we live in an age of disrespect. In our culture, what is celebrated is youth. Those who are older, you push to the side. Find advertisements other than for things specifically for seniors, featuring seniors. They're not out there. Whenever I Google pictures for my sermon, and always, if I'm saying a group of people together, a family together, it's always young. I had to specifically put in, later on there'll be one, and I forget whether it was elderly or senior family or something like that. But our culture does not celebrate it. Hey, boomer was the call last year, right, for younger people. And basically it was just hey, boomer, you don't know what you're talking about, be quiet. So honor needs to be taught because it doesn't come to us naturally. Ephesians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul quotes from this commandment that I just read and adds to it a little bit. Verse 1 of Ephesians 6, Paul says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. In verse 1, he says children. And by the way, this doesn't just mean toddlers. This would have been toddlers through teens. You don't suddenly reach 13 and now you can ignore your parents and their advice, their input. He says, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. So we do this because God wants us to. We do this because the Lord says we're to do it, and because he says this is the right thing to do. Verse 2, he then quotes from that Exodus passage, honor your father and mother. And then Paul points out, which is the first commandment with a promise. You shall have no other gods before me, the commandment says. But there's no promise of blessing with that. There will be blessing when you obey it, but Paul's saying, do this because there was a promise that went along with this. What was the promise? Verse 3, so that it may go well with you. Well, how does it go well? Here's the thing. If you obey your parents, life is so much easier than when you disobey your parents, right? If you're constantly disobeying them, problems come, trouble comes. And then he goes on to say, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. How do you enjoy long life? Well, I think there's two ways. First of all, because your parents give you advice that protects you. Our boys were young, and they're playing ball in the front yard. We tell them, like, listen, if the ball goes across the street, you stop. You look both ways. Do we do that because we like to interrupt games? We don't like them to have fun? Of course not. So you obey your parents because they teach you things. Don't put your hands on top of the stove. Well, why? I want to, because you're going to burn your hand. But the other thing I think with both of these, that it may go well, that you may enjoy long life, is that God blesses us when we obey him. When we do things his way, he does good things in our lives. Well, in Adrian Rogers' book, 10 Secrets for a Successful Family, he says we teach respect to our children. We first of all love them. So let them know that you love them always, no matter what. Make them feel secure in your love. Bless them. One person says, strokes, not pokes. Affirm them constantly. Don't belittle their joys and sorrows. Listen to them. Love them. Hug them. I remember when the boys were young. I'm a hugger by nature. My family, we hugged a lot. In fact, I remember as a teen, probably about 12, 13, I got tired of it. And I'd be like, Mom, Lynn's hugging me again. Make her stop. It was so frustrating. But eventually I got past that. And so when the boys were young, I just hugged them all the time. I just loved to hug on them. And our niece Tara, who some of you met, she came to our church for a couple of years when she lived in the area. Her parents moved to South Jersey. She was in her mid-20s. Every Thursday night we'd have her over for a home-cooked meal, and so she could do her laundry. And she'd hang out with us, and she would be with the boys. And she used to always be like, oh, you hug them all the time. And her parents were not touchy-feely at all. And so hugging was not a part of really her growing up. And she used to just be like, you're so ridiculous. And she'd make fun of me. And then she has kids. And I see her, and she's hugging on them, and she's loving on them. I said, Tara, what are you doing there? And she said, I realized when I had kids that you were right. Now, first of all, hearing those words, you were right. I'm married. I don't hear that very often. I'm just kidding. I've got an amazing wife. Deb is wonderful. But, Tara realized, this is such a good thing. So love them. Let them feel it. Let them see it. By the way, it's Father's Day. You can't hold that against me. You have to let that go. Well, the next thing is then lift them up. Make a practice of building them up. It's easy to tear them down because kids mess up a lot. In words that are similar to what he said in Ephesians 6, the Apostle Paul writes in Colossians 3:21, fathers, do not embitter your children or they will become discouraged. So Mom, Dad, be careful. Even if your kids are adults now, be careful not to do things that will embitter them. Don't provoke them to anger. Some ways we do this include failing to remember they're kids, not adults. It's easy to get frustrated because they're not doing it the way we would. Yeah, because they're younger. We provoke them to anger and bitterness by comparing them to others. Why can't you be more like your sister? We do it when we fail to express our approval. Yeah, there's things they're going to do that are going to frustrate us. But find those things that they're doing well and bless them and thank them for it and let them know you see it. We discourage them when we discipline them for reasons other than willful disobedience and defiance. Maybe they spilled the milk and now you're mad. They ruined something. Were they being willfully disobedient? If they knocked it over like that, then yeah, discipline needs to come. If they made a mistake, we all make mistakes. We discourage them, provoke them to anger when we pressure them to pursue our goals, not their own. Boy, I saw that when the boys were in sports. There were parents who had kids who hated the sport, and yet mom and dad you're going to do this. And certainly it's good to make kids try things. I understand that. But they would, like, their kids are in high school now and hated the sport, but mom and dad wanted to live vicariously through them. Then there's parents who pick what their kids are going to do for the rest of their lives. And I know some of them personally. And they're miserable because their parents made them do something that they don't enjoy. We also provoke anger and make them bitter when we withdraw our love from them. They've done something wrong, and then we just treat them coldly. That's not a good thing to do. And another thing we can do is we can overprotect them. As kids get older, it's important to start to let them go more and more. It's difficult, but to start to trust them. Dads and moms, encourage them rather than discourage them. Focus on what they're doing well, not just on how they're failing. If you saw they really worked hard and they studied and they did their best and they got a B, let them know, like, hey, I saw your hard work. I saw what you did there. And also point out that in life, we're not always successful in everything. It's common to fail. And so let them know it's okay. The next point isn't easy, but it's necessary to teach respect. As a parent, you must limit them. Children need parents, not buddies. You can be a friend, but not their buddy. Buddies don't discipline. Parents do. The Bible, in no uncertain terms, tells us that true love sets limits and it enforces them. Proverbs 13:24 says this, "The one who loves their children is careful to discipline them." If you refuse to discipline your child, it shows you don't love them. Matter of fact, the New Testament talks about that all parents discipline their children as God does. And if you're a good parent, that's what you do. But many parents are too lazy, or they're too scared, or they too want to be liked to do what's right for their children. And failure to set and enforce limits, you're harming them. My parents were pretty strict. Honestly, I feel like a little too strict. But if I had to pick between parents who were a little too strict and parents who weren't strict enough, I am thankful that they were maybe a little too strict, because they kept me from doing things that would have harmed me and set me down the wrong path. And how are your children ever going to respect the authorities they have in the world if they've never learned to respect their parents and others? You know, we see this. Kids are not taught respect, and then their boss, they think they can talk back to their boss. Sure you can. If you like being fired, talking back to your boss is a good idea. Talking back to your teacher. Actually, when I was a kid, talking back to your teacher, there were consequences. You can do that nowadays. So kids don't learn it there. But let me tell you, in the work world, just bye-bye is what bosses say to someone like that. Police officers, they have the power. They're an authority. You don't have to like them, but you need to give them respect because things will go better. So parents, we need to teach our children. Remember, Joel was about 7 years old. He was in soccer. He was playing soccer. I was his coach. And we had decided to keep him in what's called recreational soccer. So at age 7, Piscataway Soccer Club splits into traveling, which plays on Sundays. That's where the better kids go. They get more training. And then recreation, which is like, hey, you're just going to play. You know, this isn't what you're going to do for a living someday. And because of the Sunday thing, we said to Joel, we're sorry, but we need to keep you in this recreational league because that's on Saturdays. So unfortunately, all of the good players, who Joel was a very good player, they all went over to traveling, and now Joel is just dominating in recreation. And so I remember one day he's playing, and he says to his teammates in the midst of a game, "Pass the ball to me. I'm the best kid on the team." As his coach, I'm just like, oh, my son. And so I just let that one go. But it was like, I don't know, a week, 2 later, and he yells out the same thing again. "Pass it to me. I'm the best kid on my team." Like the parents can hear it. And I just had to set him down and just be like, "Son, that's not okay to do that. You know, you might be the best kid on the team, but that's not right." But there are parents who never teach their kids those things, and they become adults who nobody wants to be around. Do you like being around people like that? "I'm the best at this. Look at me." Nobody wants to be around that. So parents, we need to set limits on our children. And then the next thing we do is we need to lead them. We, as their parents, are to be the primary teachers of their faith, of their morals. Church should help. We have junior church now in the fall. We're hoping to kick back off Sunday school for kids again. But the bottom line is, if we're teaching them for an hour or two on Sunday and you are with them all week long and you're not showing them and teaching about faith, then most likely they're not going to get it. Adrian Rogers notes, we train our dogs and we don't train our kids. Then we tie up the dogs at night and let the kids run wild. We need to be training them. Proverbs 22:6 says, start children off on the way they should go, and even when they're old, they will not turn from it. Or the King James Version, as many of us learned as kids, train up your child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. So parents, be teaching them. And some of you, you're saying, I'm an adult now. It's too late. I blew it. But it's not too late. Let your kids see your faith. Maybe back then you weren't walking with Christ. Maybe back then you weren't the example you should be. But let them see. Don't preach at them. But let them see Christ in you and share some of what he's doing in you. Don't give up on them. But here's the thing. Respect must be taught, but it also needs to be caught. Your children need to see respect in you. So if you're an adult, you're a parent, you need to treat your parents with respect. And this is a hard pill to swallow for many. God did not say honor your parents if they are honorable. Respect your parents if they are respectable. He doesn't say anywhere that they earned it. God simply calls us to honor them, for better, for worse, because they were the ones who gave us life. At the very least, this means that we are polite to them, that we are respectful in their presence. If there's not ongoing abuse or violence, it means you maintain a relationship with them. Even if they live far away, you call them or shoot them a text or an email or mail them a letter. If they're open to relationship, we should pursue it. If they want nothing to do with us, it's okay, but we should still be respectful. And if your parents are involved in some sort of immorality, honor the person, but not what they're doing. It's important for our kids to see this. If we don't honor our parents, what kind of model are we setting for them? The second thing is this, then: take care of your parents in their time of need. I'm thankful for nursing home and retirement centers. They provide care because often it's more than what we can do. But let's be honest, often these places are just dumping grounds where people avoid their responsibilities. If you're a follower of Christ, you can't opt out of providing care. 1 Timothy chapter 5 says this: give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn first of all to put their religion into practice by caring for their own family, and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. Verse 8. Anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. So our responsibility is to show godliness at home and to reparent our and grandparents for the care they took for us. And this pleases God, is what Paul says. Paul says those who don't care for their own relatives, especially those of the same household, are worse than unbelievers. So this is pretty serious stuff. Now I do want to say, for those who are parents, for those who are older, don't abuse this. This goes back to creating bitterness in them. There are some parents who use passages like this just to hammer on their children. And you owe me, and you need to do things for me. I know a man in our church whose mom, her husband passed away, left a lot of money. And she blew through it because she wanted to buy stuff and ate out all the time, and she did what she wanted. And then when she ran out of money, she basically expected her son and his family to then take care of her in the lifestyle to which she had become accustomed. She expected him to pay for not just her needs, but her greeds. That's not what we're being called to do here. They are bad parents who want things they shouldn't expect. But we do need to remember that this passage comes with a promise. Remember, Paul says, honor your father and mother, and this is the first commandment with a promise, so it may go well with you, that you may enjoy long life. Do you want life to go well? Do you want to enjoy long life? Then honor God by honoring your parents, because God blesses obedience. One of Dr. Laura's listeners wrote about her experience honoring her parents. She said, I was at my mother and father's house. My father, who has full-blown Alzheimer's, had taped duct tape all over the 3 long windows in the bathroom so that the little people who haunt his days and nights wouldn't be able to look in. My mother needed help because her mother, my grandmother, who lives with them and who will be 102, likes to snack in bed, and bugs were starting to show up in her room, which was generally a mess anyway. This is to say nothing, she says, of my mother's normal daily routine of cooking, cleaning, shopping, banking, medicating, driving, washing, ironing, not sleeping more than 5 or 6 hours a night due to Dad's little people pounding on the windows, and other mortally tiring duties and distractions that would fell any lesser human being. She then said, my mom is 75 and has had a hip replacement surgery. She says, there were certain other things I'd rather have been doing that day, but I love them dearly, so there I was helping. I emptied and washed my grandmother's reeking chamber pot, scrubbed the bathroom floor where she regularly misses the toilet, took Dad's shopping for a bath curtain, pulled off all the tape, hung the curtain, changed bedding, loaded the dishwasher, and more. And then, weary and depressed, I sat down to dinner with my 3 darlings, and a peculiar thing happened. I was overcome with an immense feeling of gratitude. It occurred to me it was my honor to give them that measly gift of a single day's servitude out of the so many thousands of such days my mother puts in single-handedly without a word of complaint. It was my privilege to empty their chamber pots and wash their dirty clothes. I felt an overwhelming sense of existing for a brief moment in a glow of divine grace. I realized that to serve others selflessly to the point of being bone-tired, without expectation of reward or recognition, is the ultimate spiritual high. Do you want your kids to honor you? To understand the idea of authority? To grow up to be godly, responsible, compassionate, caring adults? Remember, they need to see that in you first. So Dad and Mom, are you setting an example for your kids, whether they are infants or adults? Are you loving them unconditionally? Are you lifting them up constantly? Are you limiting them with wise boundaries? Are you leading them in the paths of righteousness? Children, whether you are 5 or 65, are you honoring your parents? Are you showing them the respect that God has called you to give them? If they're alive, it's not too late to care for them. Deb and I have never regretted the care we took for her mom the last 2.5 years of her life as she was battling cancer. We were there for her, and Deb spent so much time in the hospital. I saw this week an example of this. Many of you have heard Tom and Sally Potty needed help. Some of you brought them meals. Tom has an autoimmune disease. He's elderly and can hardly walk. Has to use one of the walkers. Sally, his wife, and I remember just saying to her maybe about a month ago how fortunate they have been because she has been so healthy that she's been able to take care of him. But she fell and broke her hip and needed surgery to have replacement. And so some of you brought meals to them, and they were so thankful. They shared with me on Friday. I brought communion to them, and they were telling me how wonderful the church family was for that and how many meals they got out of those meals. And I also heard about their kids. Their daughter, Linda, came down from Boston. She has young children, but she spent a week with them and then another weekend. Their son, who's in the military, and he's high up in the Navy, he spent a lot of time just helping them around the house, moving furniture, getting things so that walkers could be used everywhere. And then their other son, who's down in Maryland and is a professor at the University of Maryland, he came up one Saturday and worked the entire day, spent 3.5 hours on the road, said to them when he got there, hey, what can I do for you? Well, they said out in the yard, there's stuff that landscapers aren't taking care of that was getting overgrown. And Sally just said, man, he went crazy, and he worked so hard. And then at the end of the day, spent some time with them, got in his car, drove 3.5 hours back home to his young children and to his wife. This is the kind of stuff God is talking about. We can't do everything, but we can do something. Well, to close, I'd like to, instead of me sharing something, I'd love to allow some of you to share something. And so what I'd like us to do now is to think of something your parents did that blessed you, some way that they taught you, something you can pass on to others. Maybe a way they showed you love, or a way they taught you to respect people. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to use a microphone because people watching online will not be able to hear you otherwise, and we want them to be able to be part of this. So you're going to be brave. I'm going to ask you to come to the center aisle. I'll hand you the microphone. You need to put it right about here. Matter of fact, I'll turn this one off. So you hold it right about here. If you hold it down here, it does nothing. So you hold it right about here. And just briefly share. And what this is, we're going to ask you to stick to about a minute or so. Some of you will want to go long. Please don't do that. We want to give lots of people opportunities. Do we have the timer? Okay, this is the long-feared timer. You get 1 minute before that starts. So if you see the timer starting, that means it's time to finish up what you're saying. If it gets to the end, Frankie, I want it loud, like painfully loud at a basketball game. We have the basketball game. You don't want to hear that. So please, we'd love for you to share. Don't be shy. Don't be hesitant. And I'll start. My parents very much taught us to respect those in authority and to respect each other. And I remember my dad, as teenagers, we're getting mouthy and, we're talking back, and more so to mom than to dad because dad's bigger and more physically imposing. And I remember dad would say, "You will not speak that way to my wife." He didn't say to your mom. That was implied. But this is my wife. And what he was saying was, you disrespect her, you're disrespecting me, and you're not going to do that. And I'm so thankful for that. They also gave for us. Like, we always had better clothes. Like, they never had a name brand anything. We grew up without a lot, and I didn't have them till later in high school. Mom was working. We had a little bit more, but they never bought themselves the nicer stuff. They did that for us. I'm grateful for my parents. What's something your parents did? Maybe something you can pass on. We have some young parents, a little baby back here, and we have other parents with young children. Maybe things they did that you could pass on. So raise your hand, and I'll bring it to you. So don't be shy. Somebody who's going to go first. Yeah, Greg. Some of you wondered, like, who are these new people? Greg and Kathy, they've been coming since Easter. So anyway, that's put the name to the face. This is great.
Well, my dad was an alcoholic and very dysfunctional in a lot of ways. I had a praying mom, and she would pray for me. I had an aunt that was a teacher, and there was a Protestant church down in Port Elizabeth, and she'd beep the horn, and she'd pick us up. And so I got to have a sense of God when I was younger. And when mom passed away with 62 pancreatic cancer, and so I have boys that are 47 and 43. And before that, I thought, what am I want to do for my family? What do I want to do for my kids? And it came back that my mom was a praying mom. She cared for us through all the little dysfunctionalities of alcoholic father and all. And she got my heart to do the right things. God challenged me. And so I may not have had a good start, but hopefully with God's help and a praying mom, I'd have a good finish. Thank you, sir.
Is there someone else? And I would ask, say your name and just what town you're from, just so other people can get to know who you are. So, someone else? Yeah, Jose.
When I was little, my dad told me that when he didn't live with his father, he was poor and everything, and my dad told me that one day he saw his father in the store. He goes like, "Dad, I need $1. And my grandfather said, you're not my dad. Just go away." But the good thing of this is that my father took care of his father until the last day of his day. And he gave away everything, and he took care of him every single day when he was sick and everything. He didn't remember those bad things about his father say. So that keeps me on my mind, and I'm glad that my father teach me how to be a good son, and he's getting paid right now.
Thank you, Jose. Is there someone else? Oh. For those at home, my wife is complaining that the countdown timer didn't start when I was speaking.
See, he didn't want to hand the mic over, but happy Father's Day to everyone. I was thinking this morning, my dad passed away 21 years ago in a car accident, and one of the memories I have of him is in the morning when I would walk upstairs, is he'd be sitting with his Bible and his devotions, and that's something that will just always stick with me. But just such a loving man and so giving to neighbors. Even out at restaurants, we could have awful service, and he would still tip well, which would drive Mark bananas. But he would just share the love of Christ with everyone. And even now I'm hearing of lives that he touched, and it was just something that he taught me, and I hope I can pass that on.
Someone else who's not my wife and will be nice to me? Okay, Sonia.
Morning, my name is Sonia. I'm from Piscataway. My father, when I was little, he always teach me how to be loving and caring, and he always put love first on top of everything. Like money wasn't his biggest thing, like love first and help other people without expecting anything in return. So, and he loved us very much.
By the way, unlike my wife, she listened and gave her name. Thank you, Sonia. I appreciate that. By the way, we really do love each other. We have a lot of fun together. We just like to tease each other. So, yeah, Nancy.
I'm Nancy from Hillsborough, and my father died about 30 years ago, just shortly before Will was born, and he was a quiet person, but he became a believer later in life. After I was in college, I think it was during that time that I was in college or shortly thereafter. So then he started coming to church with my mom. And but anyhow, when I was little, I'm an only child, and so my dad taught me. He took me places, and one of the scariest and probably the dumbest things we ever did was to go down when there was snowing. We went down sleigh riding, and it was Suicide Hill, for a reason. But he would be on the bottom, and I'd be on top of him, hanging on for dear life, and we'd go down this hill. He'd also take me ice skating, and I found out to my surprise that he knew how to ice skate. But anyhow, and he taught me how to mow the lawn, and all these things that I appreciate because I do it now, not Suicide Hill, but the lawn. And so I am just so thankful that he came to know the Lord, and that for all the things he taught me, practical things.
Yeah, Elmer.
I'm Elmer from Island. My dad died about 20 years ago, and my mother about 3 years after. My father taught me that no matter what, don't make excuses. Just work through it. He never took a day off. He taught me that you'll find a way. And he was courageous and fearless, scary sometimes, but my mother taught me that to be kind, gracious, she would give to anyone. And I learned from her the power of prayer. She never ceased to pray for us, and I believe that's one of the reasons I came to the Lord.
Okay, Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm from South Plainfield. I not only have my sister here, we were kind of tapping each other. Should we say something? Because our dad is here as well. So happy Father's Day, Dad. And I think that she would agree with me that he really taught us the value of hard work. Nobody ever has worked harder than my dad, I think. He's been working since he was like 6 years old and hasn't stopped since. And also generosity. He will literally give you the shirt off his back. I've seen it. Anybody needs anything, that's my dad. He just gives. He care about what he's giving. And also, we're not a very huggy family like Mark's family. Like, we don't touch each other. But I think every single one of my dad's 5 kids knows how much he loves us because of all the sacrifices he made, all of the 3 and 4 jobs he worked. So he really taught us a lot about life. So thanks, Dad.
Hi, I'm Sam from South Plainfield, and what I love about my dad is that he always loved creating memories, and that when we'd go to Six Flags or like Hershey Park when we were little, he would always bring my cousins, and they didn't have like the best father figures, but he showed us that, you know, anybody can be a dad even if they're not really your dad.
Thank you, Sam. And that really is such a great thing to share, because I think of my Grandma Paxton, we called her. It was a lady who lived 3 doors down from us, and she was much more of a grandmother to me than my own grandparents ever were. And so some of you may be like, I don't have kids. You could be a Grandma Paxton to me, or the way Sam's dad was to others. Anyone else? Yeah, John.
John from Edison. I can relate to what Sam was talking before about his parents. Elmer, sorry. One thing my parents had left us was a legacy where giving and loving. My mother was an amazing prayer, someone who prayed a lot and prayed for her family. My father was too. And it was just an amazing thing to see when I was growing up, the dedication they had. My mother was an amazing person, and I think she would probably be proud for me to stand up and talk to her this way, because she was a quiet woman, but she did a lot. If anybody needed help, she would be there to help out. So it's just a great thing to learn from.
My name is Lauren. My dad was first generation born here from Hungary. So his native language that he grew up with was Magyar, a Hungarian. And there's no such thing as a Hungarian that cannot sing. So I just remember being little with no musical accompaniment, and I still remember Dicseretek az Urat. It's praise to God, and I singing that with him. And I just remember, so probably one of the first songs I learned was Praise to God in Hungarian, first tenor part.
Any others? Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Sylvia. I'm from Monroe. Happy Father's Day, dads. I know this is really practical. Well, the first thing my dad did, he is the most fantastic example I have seen of someone honoring his parents. I mean, it was like, we all took it back, because the way he spoke about them, and my dad's in heaven, the way he spoke about them, the way he cared for them, was beyond anything I've ever seen. But the best part of my dad was that he was a fantastic cook. And he didn't just love to cook, he just loved to get into it and say, I'm gonna put this in it, it's gonna be delicious. And he just loved to see people enjoy his food. And so that's my memories that I have of him. My mom, she taught us the fear of the Lord. And I remember when we were little, we used to walk to school, and she always would say, remember, God is watching you. And my sister and I would be, where is he? She says, maybe he's up on a tree, but he's watching you. And every time we were doing something, it's like, God is somewhere, you better not do that. You know, so she instilled the fear of the Lord, and I thought that was awesome, and I praise God for my parents.
Yeah.
I'm Joshua. I'm from Piscataway. My parents are also first generation here. They come from South America, and they came with nothing, basically from zero. They didn't even know English. They didn't come to school here. They didn't. But the things that they taught me is that hard work always pays off and that nothing comes free, that you always have to work for something. And they worked up little by little until they put me into Timothy Christian, and they're giving me a life that I'm very grateful for. So happy Father's Day.
You know, I love that because often it takes us until we're maybe late 20s, have our own kids before we start to kind of appreciate our parents. Thanks, Josh. Anyone else? A couple more people before we conclude? Oh, I'll get Dan first, though.
I remember my father being a very prayerful man and a humble man. I guess by their examples, they didn't tell me to pray, but just seeing them in the morning praying and before sleeping at night, they prayed together with my mother, and that was a great example.
Okay, so I'm Sarah from Island, and I played soccer, so I played with all those kids who were like, I'm the best, and then their parents were also like that. I don't know if you, yeah. And my dad was the quietest. On any sideline, he just sat there by himself, minded his business, and to me, that was like a testament. Everyone would always tell me, your dad is so nice, and he's so quiet, and if you actually know him, he's like funny, and he's not quiet. But I mean, I was kind of a hothead when I was younger, still a little bit. And it was just so awesome to see how my dad was able to just remain patient. It was a constant reminder of, what James says, to be slow to anger, slow to speak, quick to listen. And I am none of those things. And he continues to do that, and I think that's great. And I think my mom is also very meek if you meet her at first. And I think for a long time I thought, that's kind of almost a weakness. But even the Bible talks about how the meek will inherit the earth. And she has just been so powerful through her meekness, through her kindness, and, very humble. I think both of them are humble, and that's something I'm still learning from them. So I'm thankful for that.
I'm Samuel from Island. This is my family. My dad and I, we own some property up in Newark that him and I were always working there over the weekends and stuff like that. And if you've ever had to be there with me when I'm there, at like the first 30 minutes of me being there, I think I feel like I'm being tortured and I don't want to be there ever. And then, an hour later, I'm looking for everything that I want to do and everything. And I was never like that as a small child. I feel like I was definitely an annoying kid as a young person. I still am very young, so I'm probably still annoying. Thank you for that, Sarah. But no, my dad consistently, every time, and he would notice whenever I was mad about being over there, and he would just tell me every time, he was like, don't worry, you're gonna love this by the end of it. And a lot of the time, that's really what it turned out to be. And so that's one thing that my dad taught me was it doesn't matter, however you see your environment at first, there's always something to be good made of it, and there's always something that you can find in there that you can work to glorify God with. And my mom, her family, sometimes they come and visit us in the United States, and we're all from, my parents are from Guatemala, and sometimes we always have to clean the house and everything, and I'm just like, why do we invite people here? And then my mom will just be like, you don't understand, this is part of what it is to be a Christian, where you honor your family. And so that's something that I learned from her, honoring them. And it doesn't matter, even if they come over and they talk for hours and hours, which happens a lot, and everything, it's still, it's all to the glory of God. And that reminds me of a verse that we did in Sunday school today, about how love does not rejoice in the face of unrighteousness, but in the face of truth. And that's something that I learned from both of my parents, where they were never scared to tell us when we were wrong and when we clearly did something that was sinful or something like that, and they would have no problem with telling us when we were wrong. And that's something that I'll always hold close to my heart.
Maybe one last person before we close. Oh, yeah, Hazel.
My father was very practical, and he had 4 girls. And this is what he always told us: when you go out, you make sure you know how to get home by yourself. Because once you get into college, if you don't have a ride, you need to make sure you have car fare so you can get yourself home, you can get a cab home, and you need to be able to protect yourself.
I would like to thank all of you for sharing. It really is such a great thing to hear about how your parents influenced you. It's especially encouraging to see some of the younger ones talking about, how their parents are influencing them. And none of us had perfect parents. None of us who are parents are perfect. But again, we have a Father who loves us always and is perfect, and we can always look to him no matter what we're facing. For some of you, I know both of Deb's parents are gone, and she no longer has them here. But our Heavenly Father never will leave us or forsake us, and we can always turn to him no matter what we're facing. I'd like us to close with prayer, so if you'd please just bow with me now. Lord, I thank you for the blessing of parents, and I do feel fortunate. I had parents who didn't abuse me, who did love me, who did sacrifice for me. They were imperfect, even as I am imperfect. And yet, Lord, I know that they cared about us and do care about us, and I thank you for them. I do pray for my parents today that you will bless them, that they will feel loved today, and I pray the same thing for the parents of each person here. Lord, I ask that you will help us to know how to honor our parents. I know that there are some that their parents were not there for them, and they were not a good example, and they did not show love. Lord, help them to know how to show honor and respect. I do pray, Lord, for healing, because many have hurts that are deep and the wounds are still there and the scars have not gone away. And Lord, you're a God who can heal, whether it's the pain of the loss of a parent or a parent who was never there or who harmed them, Lord, that you would just come bring healing. I also would pray for the moms and dads here that they would know your love. And Lord, help us to have wisdom with our children. Help us, even for kids who are adults, to know how we can best point them to you, how we can most love and encourage and support them. And Father, I do pray for our young people, that you will bless them and help them. I know it can be hard to listen to our parents. It's difficult when what they want is different than what the child wants. But Lord, help them to know that that parents have their best in mind. I do pray, Jesus, that you would just today let the fathers here know that you honor them, that you care about them. And Lord, help each of us, whether we're kids or mothers or fathers or never have been parents, Lord, that we would know more than anything that we have a Heavenly Father who loves us always. Jesus, may we glorify you in everything. We would pray in Christ's name. Amen.